Today I want to tell the story of two probation violation issues that impact one who's on probation or on the registry or both. Because in our system of justice, you're supposed to pay your price and then be done with it. If you go to prison for whatever years, you're supposed to be done with it. Of course, you never really are. Because if you have a felony or you have any kind of record, it dogs you very often to your dying day. Um, Unless, of course, you're one of the lucky individuals like um, certain individuals who manage to escape the registry because of a connection, maybe, or some kind of imprimatur who comes in and puts their thumb on the scale, like happened with Caitlin Grimley, and you end up getting a misdemeanor for actually having sex when you should have had multiple felonies. But be that as it may, we know that we have an unjust system. But some of you have lectured me pretty stridently about how the system really works and how everything works according to plan. And you've even lectured me on what basically would be the textbook version of what's supposed to happen. But of course, those of us who have run afoul of the system know how foul the system is when you get inside of it. And that's not to excuse anything that you may have done, may not have done, or anything like that. I'm not saying that. But the other side is very often worse. So here's two stories. Let's tell Z's story first. So Z contacted me yesterday. I met with him in Central Virginia in January at his dilapidated little hotel where he's forced to stay in because he has no relatives nearby who can accommodate him, and it's the only thing he can afford while he tries to save to regain standing as a homeowner, which he once was. To remind you, he was at work and he had a friend staying with him. The friend was trying to find work. He asked Z to have access to the computer to search for work. While he had the computer, he ended up also looking at some child pornography. The police, excuse me, visited Z, saw, because of course this logs a record to them, and arrested him. And even though he could prove he could not possibly have accessed the record and that it was in fact somebody staying in the home, the police said, well, it's your computer, therefore you're guilty. And they were able to adjudicate it successfully through the Commonwealth's attorney. They love child pornography cases, love it. Big fines. But he ended up with, I think, 3 years of active incarceration and I think 15 or 25 years on the registry and on probation. Well, while he was on probation, I think he just came off of it. He had or I think it was post probation. Doesn't really matter. I think it was post probation. You are required, according to Virginia, with the state police, not only to register but to re-register annually if you're a tier 1 or tier 2, and you are required to update if you have a new email, if you have a new phone number, if you have a new job. And he had finally, after great amount of effort, found a job. Now, he met with I keep saying probation, the compliance officer with the Virginia State Patrol, VSP. And the compliance officer filled out the paperwork over the phone, she said, and she would drop it by. But he had reminded her several times and she didn't actually do it. And then he promptly forgot. Well, little did he know that she was fired due to incompetence and never actually came by with the paperwork. About a year later, another compliance officer, a member of the State Patrol, came by and knocked on his little dilapidated motel and asked him why he had registered this. And he said he had, and he showed the text messages from this woman and found out that she was no longer there, remembered she had not come by, and this State Patrol officer said, I've been to your work. So of course they knew where he was working. And the idea is we want to keep tabs on terrible people who are on the registry, of course, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, it's a thoroughly ridiculous system that really doesn't catch anybody because the people who keep Doing this are some 95% or more of people who weren't on the registry to begin with. And I've had spirited fights with people online about, well, what about that 4%? Or it's actually much more than 4%. But the recidivism figures are very, very touchy. They're very nuanced. And there's a lot of underlying factors, external and internal factors, that make it not entirely accurate at any given time. However, I have used what the Department of Corrections has said, which is about 4.3%. Unless, of course, they come to the General Assembly asking for money, in which case they say it's really, really high. When they were trying to keep people from overseeing them with an oversight board, they said, oh no, we're doing a great job keeping track of these people. It's very, very low. So it depends on which lie you want to believe. But in any event, back to Z's case. So they set a court date. Z went to court, and he was there with a bunch of other people on a similar type of probation violation. These are not new charges, they're probation violations. Now, according to the law, and this is something that Z was unable to explain to me, the new law, which is Virginia Code, I think it's 18.2 or 19.2-306.1, 18 or 19.2-306.1. A probation violation, the first one, is not supposed to result in being hammered. It is possible that the law had not passed when he was initially cited. So operating under that assumption, I'll explain the rest of the story. So Z goes to court, but he has his initial hearing and he says, hey, I want the discovery that proves that I didn't do my due diligence and follow through with the compliance officer and do what I was supposed to do. Because they're holding him responsible for what the compliance officer didn't follow through on. The law says you have to register it. And they don't really care how you do it. They don't care that you were given assurances. Oh, yes, I'm out of town. I know you have 3 days, but come 5 days later. If they want to cite you, they will win. And that's exactly what happens. And I emphasize this all the time with the Virginia State Highway Patrol. They don't like it, but it's too bad. They frequently have to pull an officer out of the field, off the highways to fill out paperwork. Too bad. It's their rule that they're required to. They could join us in getting rid of the registry. That would be a big boon for everybody except for the Commonwealth, which makes millions every year maintaining this thing, as does every other state, needlessly. So in any event, he goes to court. He demands discovery. I want the proof that you have this against me. I want to see the documentation. He never gets it. He's denied it repeatedly. They don't give it to him. He goes to court to adjudicate the case. Everybody else who goes to court on essentially the same case is thrown in jail, 6 months or higher, taken into custody immediately. He's the only one. Why? Because he had a little bit of knowledge of the system. He fought back. He knew his rights. He had a right to see the evidence that his accusers had against him. He was able to demonstrate that he had attempted to do his due diligence, and they still gave him a year in jail. But this is what the court does when they F up something. Instead of saying, we screwed up, oh no, they're too arrogant for that. They gave him a year in jail, suspended, as a nicety to him. We're suspended, you don't have to serve anything in jail. Of course, it's still on his record, right? It's still on his record that he supposedly didn't follow through. So this is what they do for those of you out there who think, there's no big deal being on the registry, or it's not a big deal, fine. If you're a violent predator even, fine. But most of the people are not violent predators. The overwhelming majority, 85% or more, aren't even classified as a violent predator. Then you can look at what that figure really means, that 15%, that latent 15%, and see where the real nuggets are. If you want to argue that, that's fine. We can argue that. We can have that debate as to what extent we should continue to punish people in perpetuity. But on something like this, something minor, don't we all have something better to do? He was actively employed. He had never been involved with any kids, never tried to be involved with any kids, demonstrated, and it still didn't matter because the system makes a lot of money on this. Okay, section 2. I will call him Jay. So Jay contacts me and says, "Hey, I want to tell you this story where he's on probation, and he said that one of his wife's clients was involved with whatever kind of scenario where they were just all exercised somehow, and based on who she was married to, the client wanted her to know that he was going to harm her and or her husband. And when they objected and they went to the police a couple of times, the police said, what do you want us to do? There's no evidence anybody's been hurt." So you have to understand, if you're a woman and you're calling because somebody's coming after you, the police run right over there. All right, they run right over there and they say, "Oh my God, if you're being stalked or something, we'll get right on that," even though it's just her view. I was called a number of times by my ex-wife simply because I demanded that she stop stalling and let me see my daughter according to what our divorce decree was. I would show up and I had to drive 45 minutes to get there. She would say, "I'm still doing your daughter's hair. Come back in an hour." Well, I didn't have that much time, and she knew it. She knew I couldn't drive all the way home, come all the way back, and it was not fair or reasonable to wait for my daughter as she had demanded, when my daughter was fine coming with me and would often run out the door and into my arms. So this is just more nonsense. But yet, if you call and you say, somebody is harassing us because my husband is on the registry, well, they'll take their sweet time about it, right? So again, for those of you who are like, "I don't really care about people on the registry," well, remember, if you keep ceding power and authority to the police, they will keep abusing it. And one day when you want something, they'll say, "No, you ceded all this authority to us. We'll do what we want." Because that's what happens over and over again. Don't believe me? Check into it. So Jay is a little upset. He goes to the police again. Why? Because they call him on the phone. They leave a message and say, "They're going to kill you. They're going to kill you." Now, what's ironic and funny to him is he was once doing an illegal turn, and police came out of, in his neighborhood, police came out of everywhere to attack him. I remember the same thing happened to me once, and I couldn't believe how many police cars showed up. And all I did was come to a rolling stop at a stop sign where there was a wall to the left of me, and there was a service road that wasn't very busy ever to the right of me, and they came out of nowhere. So you never can tell what might get them all exercised and such. But this is what life on the registry does for people. This is the inhumanity of it. This is why it really needs to go away. Because it isn't about the law or the equity or the registry or keeping people in line who might hurt someone, or certainly it's not about protecting kids. It's about the stigma. It's about the fact that you can attack people. It's about the fact that the public is often worse, right? The remedy, so to speak, is often worse than the illness as it's ascribed to us. And you have to understand that it just is that way. And people who are in the system know this, and people who are not in the system have no effing idea what they're talking about. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked, the 5th day of October, this beautiful day. I hope you enjoy it. Have a wonderful day.